The bench at Mercy General. The snow fell in thick, deliberate flakes that Tuesday evening, transforming the city into a muffled wonderland of white as Marcus Ashford's black sedan glided through the streets toward his penthouse, but something made him glance out the tinted window at the bus stop near Mercy General Hospital, where beneath the flickering streetlight sat a figure so still she might have been carved from the winter night itself. A young woman in pale blue scrubs and a white lab coat that offered little protection against the cold, her head tilted against the glass shelter, dark hair escaping from a ponytail, exhaustion written in every line of her slumped shoulders, and Marcus found himself telling his driver to slow down, then stop, his breath fogging the window as he stared at this stranger who seemed to embody a weariness he recognized but had long since insulated himself from with wealth and success. He could have rolled down the window, could have offered her a ride, could have done something, anything, but instead he sat frozen in his leather seat, watching snowflakes settle on her coat like tiny stars, until his driver cleared his throat and asked if everything was all right, prompting Marcus to mutter, "Drive on," while the image of her burned itself into his memory with an intensity that surprised him, following him through his evening routine of gourmet dinner, fine wine, and the Financial Times, haunting his dreams where she appeared not as a stranger but as an echo of his younger self, the boy who had once fallen asleep on hospital waiting room chairs while his mother worked double shifts as a janitor to pay for his education, the same mother whose calloused hands had tucked scholarship applications into his backpack with whispered prayers that her son might escape the cycle of struggle she knew too well. The next evening found Marcus pacing his office, unable to concentrate on quarterly reports or board meetings, until he finally surrendered to the inexplicable pull and directed his driver back to Mercy General, where sure enough, there she was again, not sleeping this time but sitting upright, checking her phone with the resigned patience of someone accustomed to long waits, and before he could talk himself out of it, Marcus stepped out of the sedan into the biting wind, his cashmere coat a stark contrast to her thin scrubs as he approached the bench with the awkward gait of a man unaccustomed to spontaneous human interaction. "Excuse me," he began, his voice rougher than intended, "I couldn't help but notice you were here yesterday, do you mind if I wait with you?" She looked up with eyes the color of storm clouds, wary but kind, and nodded toward the empty space beside her, introducing herself as Elena Vasquez, a nurse practitioner finishing her first year at Mercy General, working 16-hour shifts to pay off student loans while sending money home to help her mother care for her diabetic father in El Salvador, her voice carrying the musical cadence of her heritage even as exhaustion weighted her words. Marcus found himself lying about waiting for a colleague, anything to extend this conversation that felt like stepping into a different world, one where success was measured not in stock options but in lives saved, where wealth was counted in moments of human connection rather than zeros in a bank account, and as Elena spoke about her patients, the elderly man whose hand she held during dialysis, the frightened child she sang lullabies to before surgery, the homeless woman she secretly bought coffee for during night shifts, Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest, a fissure in the carefully constructed wall he had built around his heart. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself manufacturing reasons to return to that bench, sometimes arriving early to catch Elena before her shift, other times waiting for her afterward, their conversations becoming the brightest part of his increasingly hollow days as she shared stories of medical school dreams deferred by financial reality, of choosing between textbooks and groceries, of studying by streetlight because the electricity had been shut off, yet through it all maintaining a radiance that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with purpose. He learned that she was pursuing a master's degree in nurse practicing through night classes, that she volunteered at free clinics on weekends, that she dreamed of opening a community health center in her neighborhood where people could receive care regardless of their ability to pay, and with each revelation, Marcus felt his own accomplishments, the mergers, the acquisitions, the quarterly profits, shrink in significance until they seemed as insubstantial as the snow that continued to fall around them. It was during their fifth conversation that Elena mentioned the scholarship she had applied for at the university, a full ride that would allow her to finish her degree and maybe, just maybe, turn her dreams into reality, and Marcus made note of every detail while maintaining the carefully neutral expression he had perfected in boardrooms, his mind already racing with possibilities that would require all his considerable resources and connections to orchestrate without leaving fingerprints. The machinations began the next morning, a series of anonymous donations to the university's nursing program, carefully structured through his foundation subsidiary organizations and filtered through enough intermediaries to ensure complete deniability, followed by discreet conversations with board members who owed him favors, strategic suggestions about the need for diversity and community outreach in their scholarship programs, until finally, 3 weeks later, Elena burst into tears on the bench as she told him about the miraculous phone call she had received that afternoon, the full scholarship, the living stipend, the opportunity to quit one of her jobs and focus on her studies, her voice breaking with gratitude to whatever guardian angel had made this possible. Marcus smiled and offered his congratulations while his heart hammered against his ribs, the deception feeling both necessary and shameful, but as he watched joy transform her tired features, he knew he would carry this secret gladly, even as it began to change him in ways he hadn't anticipated, softening edges he had thought permanently hardened by years of corporate warfare and personal isolation. Months passed, and Marcus found himself looking forward to their conversations with an anticipation that troubled and delighted him in equal measure, watching Elena bloom under the reduced pressure as she threw herself into her studies with renewed vigor, her eyes bright with possibilities that had seemed impossible just months before. While he began to examine his own life with a critical eye that revealed uncomfortable truths about the man he had become, wealthy beyond measure but poor in the things that mattered, successful in business but failing at the fundamental human art of connection, surrounded by luxury but starving for the kind of purpose that radiated from Elena like warmth from a fire. He started small, anonymous donations to the hospital's equipment fund, quietly paying off medical bills for patients who couldn't afford treatment, establishing a scholarship program that would help other struggling nursing students, each act of kindness feeling like a step back toward the man he had been before ambition had consumed his capacity for empathy, back toward the frightened boy who had watched his mother sacrifice everything for his future and promised himself he would make it count. The transformation accelerated when Elena began sharing updates about her fellow nursing students, single mothers working 3 jobs, immigrants sending money home while pursuing their dreams, veterans struggling with disabilities and financial hardship. And Marcus realized that one act of anonymous kindness had revealed an entire universe of people fighting battles he had never bothered to see from the climate-controlled comfort of his executive suite. He began expanding his efforts, creating a network of support so subtle and far-reaching that even he sometimes lost track of all the lives being touched by resources that flowed like water through carefully constructed channels, always anonymous, always designed to look like fortunate coincidences or institutional benevolence rather than the deliberate intervention of a man who had discovered that true wealth lay not in accumulation but in the power to lift others toward their own dreams. The revelation came on a snowy December evening exactly 1 year after their first conversation, as Marcus sat beside Elena on their familiar bench, listening to her excited plans for the community health clinic she would finally be able to open thanks to a mysterious benefactor who had appeared just when she needed him most, when she turned to him with those storm-cloud eyes and said, "You know, Marcus, I never thanked you properly," and his carefully constructed denials died in his throat as she continued, "A homeless patient recognized you from the news, said you were some big CEO, and it all started making sense. The timing of the scholarship, the equipment donations, the way you always seem to know exactly what questions to ask about my dreams," and Marcus felt his world tilt on its axis as she reached for his hand with fingers that smelled of antiseptic and hope, adding, "I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you that I know, and that knowing makes everything even more beautiful. Because you didn't help me to be seen or thanked, you helped me because it was right, because somewhere under all that expensive armor, you remembered what it felt like to need someone to believe in your dreams." The silence that followed contained multitudes, his mother's calloused hands, Elena's quiet strength, the weight of secrets and the lightness of truth, the snow falling like forgiveness around them as Marcus finally spoke, his voice rough with emotions he had buried for decades. "I was 12 when my mother died cleaning office buildings at night to pay for my school clothes, and I swore I would never forget where I came from, but I did forget. Elena, I forgot until I saw you sleeping on this bench and remembered what sacrifice looks like, what dedication means, what it costs to dream when you have nothing but hope to sustain you." And as she squeezed his hand, he felt the last walls around his heart crumble like ancient stone, leaving him vulnerable but somehow stronger than he had ever been in any boardroom or corporate battlefield. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the back of the hospital auditorium as Elena received the